So let's talk about astrology. For most people, it's just that little column in the back of a magazine, right? Vague personality types. But here's the thing that's kind of weird when you think about it. This system has survived for thousands of years. It's been through scientific revolutions, huge cultural shifts, and it's still here. So what if the way we've been looking at it is just fundamentally wrong?
Right. Let's just dive straight into that question. Because if it's all nonsense, why didn't it just disappear? Well, the source material we're digging into today puts forward a really fascinating argument. It suggests that astrology's staying power isn't because we're all delusional, but because it might be something way more complex than we assume. Maybe it's not a science of causes, but a symbolic language for describing complex systems. And this quote right here is the absolute core of the whole idea. So try to forget everything you think you know about planets making you do things. That's not what this is about. The theory is that astrology isn't causal, it's correlative. The planets are like the hands of a giant cosmic clock. They don't create time, right? They just show you what time it is. They indicate the quality of a moment, not cause it. Getting your head around this one idea, a clock, not a cause, is absolutely crucial. It's a huge shift in thinking. It takes astrology out of this old, dusty world of outdated physics and puts it right into the modern language of systems theory and information.
So look at this. On the left, you've got the old model that gets astrology in so much trouble. A causes B, simple, linear. Mars is over here, therefore you feel angry. Science quite rightly looks at that and says, nope, no mechanism, doesn't work. But the model on the right, that suggests something completely different. It says A correlates with B. The idea is that the patterns in the solar system and the patterns of life on Earth are somehow linked, like two different instruments playing in the same orchestra, resonating with the same underlying rhythm.
Okay, so I know what you're thinking. What kind of scientific framework could possibly even begin to support an idea like that? Well, this is where things get really interesting. The source material draws this incredible parallel with, of all things, chaos theory. Now, the most important thing to get here is that chaos doesn't mean random, not at all. It's actually a system with profound hidden order. Think about the weather or the stock market. These are chaotic systems. They follow very strict mathematical rules, but they are so incredibly complex that making exact long-term predictions is basically impossible.
And this brings us to the famous butterfly effect, right? The idea that a butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil could set off a tornado in Texas. It's a metaphor, of course, but it illustrates the core idea of chaos theory. An almost immeasurably tiny change at the very beginning, what scientists call the initial conditions, can lead to wildly different outcomes way down the line. That extreme sensitivity is the signature of a complex, chaotic system.
So, if these systems are so unpredictable, what holds them together? What stops them from just flying apart into total randomness? Well, the answer is something with a very cool name, the strange attractor. It's the underlying pattern that a system always orbits around. Think about your own personality. You're always changing, you're learning new things, having new experiences, but you never stop being recognizably you. You have a pattern. According to this source, that's a perfect metaphor for a strange attractor, a dynamic, unique, but ultimately bounded pattern. This table, I think, really lays out the two different ways of seeing the world. On the one side, you have that simple, linear thinking. A causes B. It's predictable, it's like a machine. But reality, from our ecosystems to our economies to our own bodies, it doesn't really work like that, does it? It works like the column on the right. It's a complex, dynamic network where everything is influencing everything else. And prediction isn't about knowing exactly what will happen, but about understanding the broad patterns. All right, so you're probably wondering, what on earth does this have to do with astrology? Well, here's the bridge. If a person is a complex system, the theory suggests that the astrological chart is the map of that system's unique pattern. Let's be really clear about this. In this model, the birth chart is not a script for your life. It's not telling you what's going to happen. Instead, it's a snapshot of the initial conditions of you as a system at the moment you began. It's a map of your personal strange attractor, that fundamental, unique pattern that your life will orbit around without ever repeating itself in exactly the same way. You can almost think of it like a legend for that map. We can translate the astrological pieces into the language of systems. The planets, those are your core variables, your fundamental drives and psychological functions. The aspects, the angles between the planets, those are the feedback loops, showing how your drives interact, how they support or conflict with one another. And the houses, those are the different environments, your career, your relationships, your home, where these dynamic patterns actually play out in your life.
And the model in our source material gets even more layered. It suggests using a map with two distinct frames of reference. The first one, the sidereal zodiac, is anchored to the constellations, to the fixed stars of the galaxy. You can think of this as the objective cosmic input, the vast, unchanging background pattern. But then, the second layer, the house system, is calculated for your exact time and location on Earth, and that represents your subjective filter, how you personally experience that bigger pattern from your unique little spot in the universe. It's a map that shows both the whole territory and exactly where you are standing in it.
Okay, so if this incredibly complex system ever existed, what happened? How did we get from mapping cosmic patterns to you're a Gemini, so you're talkative? Well, a quick trip through history tells a really fascinating story of simplification. It started out as this really sophisticated science for the state in Mesopotamia. Later, brilliant minds like the astronomer Kepler were exploring it as a science of cosmic harmony and resonance. But then came the Enlightenment, with its demand for simple, mechanical cause and effect, and it just couldn't compete. It was rejected. But the real nail in the coffin for complexity came in the early 20th century. An astrologer named Alan Leo, trying to avoid being prosecuted for fortune-telling, basically stripped the whole thing down to just your sun sign. A few years later, R.H. Naylor took that simple idea, created the first newspaper horoscope, and just like that, pop astrology was born. So really, at the end of the day, we have two completely different things that just happen to share the same name. On one side, you have the classical system, a complex mathematical tool for analyzing an entire dynamic system. On the other, you have the modern pop version, which is basically a super simplified spin-off designed for mass market entertainment. It's really the difference between a detailed architectural blueprint and a quick cartoon sketch. And that brings us right back to today. The source we're looking at suggests that our whole culture is going through this massive shift, a shift that might just make us ready to look at this old, complex system in a new way. Think about it. Everywhere you look, we're moving away from simple top-down hierarchical models. We're embracing the complexity of networks and systems. You see it in tech, you see it in biology, you see it in how we think about society. We're learning to think in terms of feedback loops and organic, holistic patterns. And the source argues that this shift in consciousness is the essence of what astrology calls the Age of Aquarius, a move toward a systems-based view of reality itself. And so that leaves us with this final thought. If our entire way of understanding the world is becoming more tuned into complexity, into networks, into chaos, maybe, just maybe, we're finally developing the language to understand what a system like astrology was trying to map all along. It asks us to consider whether this ancient, symbolic map of chaos might just have something to offer a world that is finally, after centuries, beginning to speak its language.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are tackling a subject that I think it's fair to say a lot of people have a very specific and probably very complicated relationship with.
That's putting it mildly.
We are talking about astrology. But, and this is a huge but, before you either reach for the skip button or conversely get way too excited about checking your horoscope, I really need to set the stage here.
Yeah, this isn't that.
Not at all. We are not talking about the back page of the newspaper. We are not talking about whether you, as a Capricorn, are compatible with a Gemini. We are looking at a stack of research that puts forward a pretty wild claim.
It's a bold one.
It claims that astrology is actually a deeply misunderstood application of complexity science, chaos theory, and historical sociology.
It's a fascinating pivot, really. I mean, usually when we discuss this topic, it falls into one of two camps.
Yeah.
You have total uncritical belief on one side, and then you have total dismissive skepticism on the other. But the source material we are digging into today argues for a third way. It presents this idea that astrology survived the Enlightenment not because it's some stubborn superstition.
Which is the standard explanation.
Exactly. But because it functions as a, and I'm quoting here, symbolic calculus of complex systems.
That phrase right there, symbolic calculus, that is the hook. That's what grabbed me. The central puzzle the source material starts with is what they call the survival paradox. I mean, we live in a world that is, for the most part, dominated by mechanistic science. We have split the atom, we've mapped the human genome, and yet this ancient system, this thing from Babylon, hasn't gone extinct. It's still here. It's everywhere.
Exactly. And the standard scientific critique, the one we are also familiar with, is the lack of a transmission mechanism. Any physicist will look at astrology and ask, okay, where is the force?
Right. Show me the physics.
Is it gravity? Well, no. The doctor standing next to the baby at birth exerts way more gravitational force than the planet Mars does. Is it some kind of radiation? No, we can't detect it. So if there is no physical transmission, the argument goes, the whole thing must be nonsense.
Yeah.
Case closed.
It's the how does the planet touch the person problem. That's always been the wall. But the research we're diving into, it just flips the table on that entire question. It says, you're asking the wrong question. Stop looking for a physical force.
Precisely. It's not about causation, it's about correlation. The argument here is that astrology isn't a failed physical science. It never was. It's actually a successful descriptive language for what it calls a causal orderedness.
A causal orderedness.
Okay. It suggests that the solar system and, say, human society are what chaos theorists call coupled oscillators. They move together, they resonate. Not because one is pushing the other, but because they are synchronized parts of the same overarching system.
Okay, so let's unpack our mission for this deep dive then, because the main report we're looking at is titled The Chronometric Architecture of Complexity.
It is a mouthful.
It is, but it's very precise. Essentially, we are going to try to synthesize 3 really distinct and pretty heavy fields: sidereal astrology, and we'll define what that is in a bit because it's key.
Crucial.
Then sociological chaos theory and history.
And the goal really is to move you, the listener, away from what the report calls pop astrology, which it's actually incredibly critical of, and toward a rigorous, almost mathematical model. We are going to look at the solar system as a clock, not a cause.
A clock. I like that.
We're going to look at the human personality, not as a fixed list of traits, but as something called a strange attractor. And we're going to ask a very strange question. Could something called morphic resonance be the Wi-Fi signal that connected all?
The Wi-Fi of the cosmos. I love that image. And we're also going to have to distinguish between 2 frames of reference. The galactic frame, which the report equates with truth with a capital T.
The objective reality.
And the phenomenological frame, which is how we actually experience life down here on the ground, our subjective reality. So, buckle up. This is not your daily horoscope. This is, well, it's the physics of fate.
Let's dive in.
All right, part 1. To even begin to understand this, we have to start with the physics. To get your head around this reimagined astrology, you first have to understand why the old scientific worldview, the Newtonian worldview, just doesn't fit anymore for complex systems.
The Newtonian view is comfortable. It's what most of us learned in high school physics. It is linear, it is causal, it is, most importantly, predictable. The classic metaphor is the billiard table.
The clockwork universe.
Exactly. You hit a billiard ball at a certain angle with a certain amount of force, and you can calculate exactly where it will go. A causes B. Simple, clean.
Right, and if I hit it harder, it goes further. It's proportional. The output is directly related to the input.
Correct. But the source material argues that while that works perfectly for billiard balls, it fails miserably when you try to apply it to complex systems, like the weather, or the stock market, or, a human life.
So what's different about those?
These systems are nonlinear. They are recursive. And that's a key word. It means A interacts with B, but that interaction then changes A, which in turn changes B again. It's a feedback loop. Everything is talking to everything else, all the time.
And this is where we get into the heart of chaos theory, specifically this idea of sensitivity to initial conditions.
Yes. This is the famous butterfly effect. And it comes from a meteorologist, Edward Lorenz, back in the 1960s. He was running an early computer simulation of weather patterns.
On one of those giant room-sized computers.
Oh, yeah. And he wanted to rerun a particular sequence, so he typed in the starting numbers from a printout of the previous run. But just to save a bit of time and space, he rounded off the data. Instead of typing in the full number, 0.506127, he just typed in 0.506.
I mean, that is a tiny, tiny difference. It's a rounding error. It shouldn't matter.
It's a difference of less than 1 part in 1,000. In a Newtonian linear world, that tiny difference in the input should result in a tiny, almost unnoticeable difference in the outcome. But when Lorenz came back a few hours later, the weather pattern the computer generated was completely, wildly different.
Yeah.
That tiny, insignificant change had been amplified by all the feedback loops in the system. It cascaded, and it produced a totally divergent future.
So that's the metaphor, right? A butterfly flapping its wings in Brazil can, theoretically, set off a chain reaction of atmospheric events that causes a tornado in Texas weeks later.
That's the one. And the application of this to sociology, to our own lives, is just profound. It means that history isn't a straight line. It's a branching, unpredictable fractal. A chance meeting at a coffee shop, a particular rhetorical choice made by a politician, a train running 2 minutes late.
These aren't just minor details.
They are small inputs that can trigger massive system-wide cascades. You can't just ignore the small stuff.
Which brings us to this concept of hidden determinism. I think this is a really important distinction because when people hear the word chaos, they immediately think random. They think it's just noise, that there are no rules.
That is such a common misconception. Chaos is the opposite of random. Randomness has no rules at all. Chaos has very strict rules. The weather, for example, follows the laws of thermodynamics with perfect precision. It is deterministic.
But it's unpredictable.
It's unpredictable in the long term because it's so sensitive to those initial conditions. You can't possibly measure every single particle in the atmosphere, so you can't predict the specific state of the system a month from now. But, and this is the key, you can predict the pattern of the system. You know it will produce clouds and wind and rain, just not exactly when and where.
And this is the bridge to astrology. If a human life or a personality is a complex adaptive system, just like the weather, then it must be incredibly sensitive to its initial conditions.
There it is. And what is a natal chart? From this new perspective, it isn't a magic spell. It's not a fortune-telling device. It is a high-fidelity map of the initial conditions of that human system at the moment of its emergence, what physicists call $T a lie, times zero.
So the argument is that the chart is like a slice through the phase space of the cosmos at that exact moment.
Yes, that's the technical term, a Poincaré section.
Yeah.
That's a concept from geometry. Imagine you have a complex, tangled, three-dimensional shape that represents all the possible states of a system. A Poincaré section is like taking a very thin slice through that shape to see the pattern of the cross-section.
Okay, so how does that map onto a chart?
Well, the source material argues that the planets in the chart represent the primary variables in the system, the drives, the energies, the core functions.
Like Mars is the drive to act, Venus is the drive to connect.
Something like that. Then the aspects, the geometric angles between the planets, those represent the feedback loops, the resonances and dissonances between the drives.
And the houses?
The houses are the domains of application, the areas of life where these complex patterns play out. So an astrologer in this model isn't looking at a billiard table and saying, Mars will hit Venus and make you fall in love.
Yeah, that's the old Newtonian model.
Exactly. They are looking at a weather map of your initial conditions and saying, given this starting configuration, this specific geometry of feedback loops, the system is likely to develop these kinds of storms, these kinds of sunny spells throughout its lifetime.
It's a map of the hidden determinism within the chaos of your life.
Precisely. It's the why behind the what.
Okay, so let's move on to part 2 then, because this builds directly on that idea. You mentioned strange attractors earlier, and this is probably the coolest visual concept in the entire report. What exactly is an attractor?
In systems theory, an attractor is it's simply a set of states toward which a system tends to evolve over time. It's the shape of its behavior. If you imagine the state of a system as a single dot moving around on a map, the attractor is the path or the region the dot keeps returning to. It's what the system is attracted to.
Okay, so can you give us some examples of different types to make it more concrete?
Sure. The simplest one is called a point attractor. Imagine a pendulum. You push it, it swings wildly for a bit, but eventually friction slows it down and it comes to rest right at the bottom, hanging perfectly still. That single bottom point is the point attractor. The system wants to go there and stay there. It seeks stability.
And in, like, a social system?
You could think of a traditional agrarian village that stays exactly the same for 1,000 years. Same customs, same farming techniques. It's a system at rest. Very stable, but also very static.
Boring, but stable. Got it.
Then you have a periodic attractor, which is also called a limit cycle. This is a simple loop. The system oscillates between a few states, over and over again. Think of the boom and bust cycle of a capitalist economy.
Right. Expansion, recession, recovery, expansion.
And back again. Or the way national politics often swings from a liberal government to a conservative one, and then back. It never settles into a single point, but it repeats the same path over and over.
It's a rut. You're just going around in circles, fundamentally.
Exactly. But then you have the strange attractor. This is the signature of a chaotic system. The most famous one is the Lorenz attractor, which was discovered from that same weather simulation. It looks like a butterfly's wings, or a kind of twisted figure 8.
Okay, I think I've seen pictures of it. So the dot, the system, it loops around one wing for a while.
And then, unpredictably, it will flip over and start looping around the other wing and then back again. But here is the absolute key to understanding it.
It never traces the exact same line twice.
That is the crucial feature. It is bounded. The dot always stays within that butterfly shape. But its path is infinite in its variety. It never, ever repeats itself exactly. And the source material makes this incredible claim that a human personality is a strange attractor.
I love that. I mean, that feels so true. We aren't static points. We're not just a list of adjectives on a page. And we're not robots just running the same loop every day.
We're dynamic. We have character. And that's the boundary of the attractor. You are you. You have patterns. People who know you can recognize you. But you are never exactly the same person today that you were yesterday. You orbit the self, but your specific trajectory is always new.
So if we apply this back to the astrological chart, when an astrologer is looking at your chart, they are, in effect, analyzing the geometry of your personal strange attractor.
Yes, they are not trying to predict specific events because, as we said, specific events in a chaotic system are fundamentally unpredictable. The butterfly flaps its wings, and who knows what will happen Tuesday at 3 p.m.
Right.
But they can analyze the shape of the attractor, the overall pattern. They can look at the chart and say, okay, your system tends to orbit the concept of partnership, but it does so through the filter of the planet Pluto.
Which in astrological language implies things like power, transformation, intensity, maybe some obsession.
Right. So the prediction isn't, you will meet a tall, dark stranger on Tuesday. That's pop astrology. The prediction is, throughout your life, your system will consistently orbit themes of intense, transformative power dynamics within your significant relationships. The specific event is chance. The general pattern is determined by your initial conditions.
That makes so much more sense than the old fortune-telling model. It respects that we have, free will, or at least that the future is open and not set in stone. But it also acknowledges that we have a structure, we have a shape, we have tendencies.
We are dancing within a defined space. We can step anywhere we want on the dance floor, but we can't just leave the building. The chart describes the building.
Okay, so we have the map, the chart as a map of our strange attractor. But we still have that nagging question from the skeptics, the one we started with. How? If there's no gravity beam, no magic ray, how does the state of the solar system at T0 connect to the state of the baby? This brings us to part 3, the mechanism.
Right, the action at a distance problem. The source material relies heavily here on a concept from physics called coupled oscillators.
Which sounds like a German techno band from the 90s.
It totally does. But think of it like this. If you have two pendulum clocks, old grandfather clocks, and you hang them on the same flexible wall, and you start them swinging at different times.
Okay.
Over a few days, they will synchronize. They will start swinging in perfect unison. Not because one clock reached over and pushed the other one, but because the tiny vibrations from each clock travel through the shared wall, creating a feedback loop until they find a common rhythm.
They become entangled in the same field.
That's the idea. The report suggests the solar system is a massive resonant field. It's not a clockwork machine with separate gears. It's a single, vibrating, humming entity. And the concept here is synchronicity, which the psychologist Carl Jung talked about, or sympathia, which the ancient Stoic philosophers talked about. The Earth and the planets are part of one system.
So let's take a classic example. When Saturn squares Mars in the sky, which is traditionally seen as a very tense, difficult, turbulent aspect, it's not that Saturn is beaming a bad vibe ray gun at the Earth.
No, that's the old causal way of thinking. In this model, the Saturn square Mars geometry is the time signature of the entire local cosmic field at that moment. The turbulence is everywhere simultaneously. It's in the gravitational and magnetic fields of the solar system, and it's here on Earth. A baby born at that moment is, and this is another quote, a fractal holographic fragment of that specific moment in time.
Fractal holographic fragment. Okay, that's a heavy phrase. Let's break that down. Fractal means the patterns repeat at different scales, and holographic means the part contains the information of the whole.
Exactly. Just as a single drop of ocean water contains the complete chemical signature of the entire ocean, the moment of your birth contains the geometric signature of the whole solar system at that instant. You are a little piece at that moment.
But how does that pattern stick? How does it become the blueprint for a whole life? And to explain that, the report brings in a pretty controversial biologist, Rupert Sheldrake, and his theory of morphic resonance.
Yeah, Sheldrake is definitely a controversial figure in mainstream biology, but his ideas fit perfectly into this framework. Sheldrake argues that the so-called laws of nature aren't eternal, unchanging edicts handed down from on high. He thinks they're more like habits.
Habits of the universe.
Yes. When a system organizes itself in a certain way for the first time, let's say a chemical forming a specific crystal shape, It creates what he calls a morphic field for that pattern. The next time that same chemical anywhere in the universe tries to crystallize, it's easier for it to fall into that same pattern because the field for it already exists. It tunes into the habit.
It's like cutting a groove in a record. Once the groove is there, the needle naturally wants to follow it the next time.
That's a perfect analogy. So applying this to astrology, the planetary positions in the sky are like the hands of a clock. They aren't causing anything, they're just telling the time. They're indicating which ancient cosmic morphic fields are currently active, which habits are being triggered.
So if Mars is in, say, sidereal Scorpio, it triggers that ancient deep groove of strategy and intensity that has been formed over eons.
And the baby's developing nervous system, which is in a very plastic and receptive state, effectively downloads this habit at the moment of birth.
Through resonance.
Through resonance. It's a wireless transfer of information, a tuning of the system, not a transfer of physical force.
Wow. Okay, this brings us to a really critical and I have to say very technically specific part of the report. Part 4, the machine code. Because the report is very, very adamant about this. You can't just use any old astrology. It argues for a very specific technical setup to match this complexity theory model.
This is non-negotiable for them.
It calls for the Fagan-Bradley sidereal zodiac plus Placidus houses.
And for any listeners who only know their sun sign, this is where we really go under the hood of the car. This is the difference between knowing how to drive and knowing how to rebuild the engine.
Let's start with the zodiac then. Most people in the West, if they've ever looked at astrology, use what's called the tropical zodiac.
Right, and the tropical zodiac is fundamentally tied to the seasons of the Earth. 0 degrees of Aries is defined by convention as the vernal equinox, the first day of spring in the northern hemisphere. It's an Earth-Sun relationship.
Yeah.
Very practical, very useful for agriculture.
But there is a problem, a big one. It's called precession.
The wobble. The Earth wobbles on its axis like a slowly spinning top. And over thousands of years, that wobble causes the position of the equinox to drift backward against the backdrop of the fixed stars.
So what does that mean in practice?
It means that today, the tropical zodiac has drifted about 24 degrees away from the actual constellations that share the same names. When a modern tropical astrologer says the sun is in Aries, if you were to actually go outside and look, you'd see the sun is in the middle of the constellation of Pisces.
And this report says that's a fatal flaw if we are talking about the universal environment and not just Earth seasons.
Correct. The report argues you have to use the sidereal zodiac, specifically the version that was mathematically restored in the mid-20th century by an Irish astrologer named Cyril Fagan and his American colleague Donald Bradley. They re-anchored the zodiac to the stars. They used the fixed star Spica at precise location, 29 degrees Virgo 2, to lock the grid to what they called the galactic frame.
So the sidereal zodiac represents the truth out there, the inertial frame, the deep time of the galaxy itself, not just our local seasonal cycle.
It represents the objective archetypal inputs, the actual cosmic environment. But then, that's only half of the equation in the report's model. The other half is the houses. And for this, they choose a system called Placidus.
Now, Placidus is what's called a time division system, and I know a lot of astrologers complain about it because at very high latitudes, like if you're born in Norway or Alaska, the houses get really warped and distorted. Some are huge, some are tiny.
They could become intercepted, yeah.
Yeah.
A whole sign can be swallowed up inside a house. But the report argues that this supposed flaw is actually its greatest feature, because Placidus is based on dividing time, not space. It measures how long it takes for each degree of the zodiac to rise over the horizon, and time is distorted at high latitudes. The days are incredibly long in the summer and incredibly short in the winter.
So Placidus is actually accurately modeling the subjective distortion of time and space as experienced by the observer at their specific location on Earth.
Exactly, and in chaos theory, that's crucial. You must have both. You have the objective input from the sidereal stars, the galactic truth, and you have the subjective output modeled by the Placidus houses, the lived experience. The Placidus system models how the specific time field of your birthplace warps and filters the incoming cosmic signal.
It's the personal filter.
It's what the sociologist Nicholas Lemon would call the autopoietic boundary. It's how the system you organizes and processes the infinite noise and information of the universe into a coherent personal narrative. So this specific combination, sidereal plus Placidus, is, to the report's authors, the only one that gives you the complete phase-space diagram, the truth plus the experience.
That is such a satisfying synthesis. I mean, it's not just picking a system because it works better anecdotally, but because it aligns with the fundamental physics of how we experience reality.
It matches the geometry of the system. It's a coherent model.
Okay, let's pivot from the technical stuff to the story, part 5. Because the report frames the entire history of astrology as a kind of detective story, a fall and rise. It's a reminder that this wasn't always a fringe thing in the back of a magazine.
Oh, not at all. If we go back to Era 1, to Mesopotamia, around 3000 BCE, astrology was, for all intents and purposes, state science. It was the ancient world's equivalent of the NSA or the CIA.
The National Security Agency of Babylon. I like that.
Essentially, they had this massive sprawling database inscribed on thousands of clay tablets called the Enuma, Anu, and Lil. It was a giant collection of celestial omens. If this happens in the sky, then this tends to happen on Earth. But it was not for regular people. It was exclusively for the king.
Right, you'd see things like, if Mars approaches the Scorpion, there will be a breach in the palace of the prince. It's all about the state.
Exactly. It was about monitoring the system's stability of the kingdom. The court astrologer's primary job was to watch the sky to warn the king of bifurcation points. That's the term from chaos theory, for moments of extreme instability where the entire system could suddenly flip or collapse.
Yeah.
And notably, they were strictly sidereal. They were looking at the actual star.
So when did it shift from being about the king to being about me? When did it become personal?
That happens in what the report calls Era 2, the Hellenistic period. After Alexander the Great conquers the East, you get this amazing fusion of Babylonian mathematics and Greek philosophy. The Greeks invent the concept of the horoscopos, which means the hour marker, what we now call the otendant.
And that was the key.
That was the technological breakthrough. It allowed you to cast a chart for a specific minute of the day, which meant you could do it for an individual person's birth, not just for the founding of a nation. But this is also where the report says the great error creeps into the system.
Ptolemy.
Claudius Ptolemy. In the 2nd century CE, in Alexandria, he writes the Tetrabiblos, which became the Bible of Western astrology for the next 1,500 years. He's trying to systematize everything, but he makes a fateful decision. He decides to tether the signs of the zodiac to the seasons, not the stars. He creates the tropical zodiac.
And at the time, it didn't really matter.
At the time, the two zodiacs roughly overlapped, so nobody really noticed the problem. But they began to drift apart immediately, year by year. The map and the territory began their long separation.
So the system was technically broken, but the math survived.
Yes, because we moved to Era 3, the Islamic Golden Age. While Europe is mired in the Dark Ages, the great scholars in Baghdad and Cordoba are preserving and refining all this knowledge. They perfect the astrolabe, which is essentially the analog computer you need to do the complex spherical trigonometry to calculate those Placidus house cusps.
And they bring in these grand historical cycles. I think it was Albumasar who talked about the great conjunctions of Jupiter and Saturn.
Which is pure sociological chaos theory. He was looking for the periodic attractors in history, the long-term cycles and the rise and fall of empires, all clocked by these planetary alignments.
Then we hit the Renaissance, Era 4. This is the high water mark, right? You have people like Johannes Kepler. We think of him as the father of modern astronomy, the guy who figured out planetary orbits or elliptical, but he was a full-time working astrologer.
He absolutely was. And he wasn't just doing it for the money, though it did pay the bills. He genuinely believed in what he called harmonic theory. He thought the universe was structured on principles of geometric resonance, like a musical instrument. He actually discovered the minor aspects, like the quintile, because he was looking for the subtle geometry of the soul's attractors. He hated the superstition, but he loved the underlying mathematical structure.
So what killed it? If it was that sophisticated, what happened? Era 5, the divorce.
The Enlightenment happened, specifically 1660, the founding of the Royal Society in London. The whole paradigm of science shifted to the clockwork universe. The universe was seen as being made of dead matter, pushed and pulled by mechanical forces. And since astrology couldn't show a physical gear connecting Mars to the king's health, it was excluded from the club.
But it wasn't disproven, though. That's a key point in the report.
No, that is the key. It's not that they ran a definitive experiment and proved astrology failed. They simply decided, by decree, that any action at a distance that didn't involve a known physical force was occult and therefore unscientific. It was socially ostracized. It became a marker of being uneducated or superstitious.
Which leads us directly into the modern mess. Part 6, the modern mutation. How in the world did we get from Kepler's harmonic theory and complex geometry to You're a Leo, you're dramatic.
You can pretty much trace it back to one man, Alan Leo, in the early 1900s. He was a prominent British astrologer who was facing prosecution under the Vagrancy Act for fortune-telling. He was literally going to go to jail.
So he had to rebrand the entire field to save his own skin.
He rebranded astrology as character analysis. It's not predictive, it's psychological. But to sell this new version in books to a mass audience, he had to simplify it radically. He couldn't expect the average person on the street to calculate a Placidus chart with an astrolabe and a book of tables. So he focused on the one single piece of data everyone knows, their birthday.
The sun sign.
He reduced the entire complex multivariable system, the 10 planets, the dozens of aspects, the 12 houses, the ascendant, down to just the position of the sun. One variable out of hundreds.
That is a massive, catastrophic loss of data.
It's like trying to describe a Beethoven symphony by only playing the notes of the tuba. It's not just incomplete, it's totally misleading. And it directly created what psychologists call the Barnum effect, those vague general statements that apply to just about everyone. You work hard, but sometimes feel unappreciated. Well, who doesn't?
And then R.H. Naylor came along and basically nailed the coffin shut with the newspaper column.
1930. The future Princess Margaret is born. The Sunday Express newspaper wants a sensational story. Naylor writes a piece about her birth chart and makes some predictions. It's a huge hit. He gets a weekly column, and to fill it, he invents the 12-paragraph format we all know today, one for each sign. Astrology becomes entertainment.
It becomes a commodity, a product. And this is where the serious scientific and sociological critique becomes completely valid. The report mentions the Frankfurt School sociologist Theodor Adorno. He hated newspaper astrology with a passion.
Adorno called it secondary superstition. He argued it was a tool of social control. It trained people to be passive and submit to abstract authority. The stars say it's a bad day for money, so I won't ask for that raise. He argued it stops people from actually trying to fix their lives. And he was absolutely right about pop astrology.
Then you had Paul Feyerabend, the philosopher of science, who pushed back from the other side.
Feyerabend was great. He famously defended astrology against a group of 186 leading scientists who signed a public manifesto against it in 1975. He pointed out, quite correctly, that probably none of those scientists had ever actually studied the subject in any depth. They were rejecting it based on dogma, not evidence. He said science had become a new church, rejecting things just because they didn't fit the current liturgy.
They were guilty of scientism, the belief that only the physically measurable is real.
Which, ironically, brings us full circle, because now, with quantum mechanics and complexity theory, science itself is finally building a framework that can accommodate the very causal and interconnected phenomena that the astrological model has always, in its own language, talked about.
This leads us perfectly into the final section, Part 7, the sociology of the Aquarian Age. Because this isn't just about math and physics, it's about where we are going as a culture. And for this, the report cites the sociologist Petrum Sorokin.
Sorokin had this grand theory of cultural mentalities. He said that cultures cycle through three major phases. You have the ideational phase, think medieval Europe, where ultimate truth is spiritual. It's about faith, God, the unseen world.
Okay.
Then the pendulum swings to the sensate phase, that's the modern West for the last 500 years, where ultimate truth is material. It's what you can see, touch, and measure. Empiricism, science.
And he says we are now in the crisis of the sensate age.
He wrote this decades ago, but it feels so current. He said we would reach a point of hyper-materialism, a breakdown of meaning, a decay into social and mental chaos. But he also predicted that out of that crisis, a synthesis would emerge, the idealistic culture, which would integrate the best of both.
And in astrological terms, which the report directly correlates, this is the shift from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius.
Exactly. The Piscean age corresponds almost perfectly to that ideational hierarchy model, the central church, the divine right of kings. Truth comes from above. Belief is key. Aquarius, on the other hand, corresponds to the network. It's decentralized, horizontal, peer-to-peer. It's about information and knowledge.
The internet, blockchain, open source everything.
And complexity theory itself. Complexity is the science of networks. So the report makes this final argument that sidereal astrology, this complex systems-based version we've been describing, is the Aquarian system of self-understanding.
It's social autopoiesis, to use that term again. It's the network becoming self-aware of its own operating system.
It moves beyond the simple psychological comfort of pop astrology, which is just a sensate product, a quick fix. And it also moves beyond the old fatalism of the ancient world. It offers a true systems view. It sees the human being as an active node in a vast galactic network, operating not through crude forces, but through information and resonance.
That is a very powerful place to land this whole discussion. So let's try to wrap this all up. What is the final synthesis here? What's the takeaway?
I think the synthesis is that the universe is both determined and unpredictable. It is fractal. It is a causal. The horoscope, when properly constructed and interpreted, is the map of the chaos. Your life is the territory you navigate. We're not puppets on strings. We're more like surfers on incredibly complex waves. The waves are determined by the physics of the ocean, the cosmos. But how we choose to ride them, that's the art of the strange attractor.
And I have to ask you the provocative question that the report itself ends on. If Rupert Sheldrake is right, and the laws of nature are just habits, and if we really are entering a new cultural and cosmic age, the Aquarian age, are we, right now, in the process of rewriting the cosmic habits for the future?
That is the ultimate question, isn't it? If consciousness is part of the feedback loop of reality, then by understanding the system in a new way, we actually change the system. Maybe for the last 2,000 years, the dominant habit was hierarchy and fate. Maybe the new habit we are collectively forming is one of resonance and network. We might be the ones writing the machine code for the next epoch.
That is a thought to leave you with, to look at your own life not as a linear path from A to B, but as a strange attractor. Beautiful, chaotic, never repeating, but always uniquely yours.
A fractal of the whole.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the next system.